Welcome to Profits on Purpose, the podcast for e-com and CPG founders who are looking to scale their businesses both profitably and purposefully. I'm your host, Nate Littlewood from Future Ready CFO, where I help seven-figure e-com and CPG founders make confident, data-backed decisions that drive profitable growth, all while helping them sleep better at night. Anyway, today's guests are Kevin Larkai and Monté Burrow, who are the co-founders of Black Leaf Vodka, which is the first ever French organic vodka company in the United States. Their story is a real masterclass in building against the odds. These guys met through a chance encounter in Cognac, France, and have been through navigating distributor rejection to becoming an award-winning challenger brand that's gone toe-to-toe with industry giants. And, Monte and Kevin are building something pretty remarkable here, and they're doing it through grit and highly complementary skill sets. One of the things that I really respect and appreciate about this business is the way that they're balancing mission with margin in one of the most capital intensive and heavily regulated industries out there. This conversation gets into the real challenges of scaling a spirits brand, from the fundraising grind, the three-tier distribution maze, and the constant tension that exists between data and instinct when resources are tight. Kevin, Monte, welcome to the show. It's great to have you guys here.
Thanks for having us, Nate.
Of course. Well, guys, I love the backstory here, and I figure a good place to get started is just talking a little bit about your history. I'm curious, could you tell me a bit about the moment that you realized that this was more than just a project, and that it actually needed to become a real business?
Yeah, so I'll kick off. So the vision kind of started with just being a dreamer, right? I'm a firm believer in we get to shape the future, right? And I mean everything from the products that we use to just everything that becomes a fabric of our society. So when I was on vacation in France, I had this, chance meeting that ended up being what we think is the future of vodka, right? Which is looking at it through an organic, sustainable, and premium lens. So created the product, and then the reality hit that this is business at the end of the day. So it was this side hustle, this product that was just there, but the feedback on it was incredible. Everyone that would try it would be like, wow, this is some of the best liquid that I've had. The positioning was resonating with people. So it got to a point where it was like, this is not just some small thing. This is something that could actually have legs, and it could actually realize that thing of it being that leading brand in the future. So Monte and I joined forces, and we were like, yeah, we got to go all in if we want this thing. So at the time, I was in finance, and this is right around COVID, when COVID hit. And we were managing a portfolio. So doing a lot of, when COVID hit, we had to do so many different reforecasts and different scenarios. I can't serve two masters. I can't. So at that point, decided to dive all in and just commit fully to building this thing. And at least that's my perspective. Obviously, Monte can share his.
Cool. Anything to add from your end, Monte?
No, I mean, I think Kevin and I converged at different times in the Black Leaf journey, right? So Kevin, as he mentioned, was the dreamer behind everything, and he kind of brought it to life. And as he says, not my words, but he said, I kind of came aboard to help put some lighter fluid on it. But, the reality for me is it became real when, I left my 9-to-5 corporate job and I'm sitting in front of my laptop and I'm looking at this bottle and I'm like, oh, let me wash my mouth. But, this is real. It became real very quick.
Okay. I love that. I love that. So I guess what I'm hearing here is, Kevin, you were initially at least kind of the dreamer and the visionary. And from what I understand, you paired up with Monte because he actually had some hands on the ground experience, like building businesses like this. And we've touched on your backgrounds a little bit, but Kevin, I understand you spent a big chunk of your career working in finance, and Monte, you're from more of the an industry background. So there's a lot of synergies there. There's a lot of really complementary skills. I mean, was that just a fluke, or did were you guys kind of fairly intentional about that? How did that come about?
I would say it was intentional, and intentional in that, we had the conversation and it just fit like a glove, right? So if we
Hmm.
had the conversation and, where I was weak, Monte was also weak, it wouldn't have been that same synergy. So it was
Mm.
easy in that it wasn't like, I was talking to 10 different people and Monte was number 10. It was just very natural, but
Hmm.
also in just breaking down kind of the functional areas of a business and what I could focus on, what he could focus on. It was like the perfect pairing. And
Mm.
we've proven that over the years as we, work together.
And
Hmm.
I love to
Okay.
add to that. Like sometimes people in business overcomplicate things. We try to find the right words or the right balance, and the reality is some things when it's meant to be, it happens, and you just got to recognize it. So I mean,
Mm.
I was cutting my chops in the alcohol space, and I
Hmm.
would see brands all the time because from what I do, brands just would always come across my desk. So when Black
Hmm.
Leaf was presented to me, it was like, okay, here we go again. But it was something that was there. Like I felt it immediately,
Mm.
immediately. And
Hmm.
then when I met
Hmm.
Kevin, I hate to use the word organic because but that was the through line. It was a very organic,
Yeah.
complementary feel, and it just
Yeah.
was something was there. So as time passed,
Yeah.
I would always go back to, what, this is really something that could be bigger than what it is. And we just had a conversation one day and was like, you know what? Here are some of my goals and ambitions. Here's yours. And it aligned, you know what I mean? And kind of like when the world
Yeah.
speaks
Yeah.
to you, listen.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. Well, it sounds like you guys have formed a really, really powerful partnership here. So that's a great foundation to be building off of. So, Kevin, you're the finance guy in the room. And one of the things I recall from our conversation a month or two back is that you mentioned that finance is, an ongoing struggle for the business. And honestly, that is something that's pretty refreshing to hear, like from a fractional CFO, or to a fractional CFO like me, coming from a finance guy like you, because in my experience, a lot of founders have this fairly complicated relationship with finance, and they often, don't like to admit that it's not working. Some of them, aren't even looking at it closely enough to really be aware that it's not working. I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit about your relationship with the business finances and how that may have, changed or evolved over time.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say, when you're operating in a space with limited resources, you
Hmm.
have to be very intentional about the use of resources, right? And in
Mm.
order to do that, you have to understand your resources and the oversight and of all of
Hmm.
that, which really is a finance and accounting function. So,
Mm.
from not even having the necessary data, meaning to your point, some founders don't even focus on it because it's so realizing that, okay, we need to be able to understand our books and understand what's actually happening, understand where we're spending, understand the return on different things. There's a level of organization, right? Um,
Mm.
there's a level of optimizing where you can actually look at the data and it'll make some sense. So I
Hmm.
think challenge was not having any of that infrastructure, right?
Mm. Mm.
And we always say amongst us or between us that if we focused on just one aspect of the business, it would be world class. But the
Right.
reality is we've got 6 areas. So, some shoes will drop, but
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
we had to realize that, okay, finance was important. So setting up the infrastructure to be able to look at the data. So
Mm.
that's definitely was a challenge that I would say we've somewhat overcome. But
Hmm.
the greatest challenge around finance is, again, just limited resources. So you're constantly having to, do more with less. So it's
Hmm.
a constant question of where should my money go, and
Yeah.
because you can't have too many misses because again, you don't have a lot to play with.
Yeah, you made a few really, really interesting points there, especially about limited resources and kind of, reading between the lines. That's both a statement about the people and personnel, but I presume also a statement about like the finance and capital that you have. I'd It sounds like you're very, very aware of some of the difficult decisions that arise when you're in this seat, and there's a lot more opportunities and things that you would like to be doing than there are dollars in the bank and people to actually manage them. Tell me a little bit about how you figure out what to focus on. What are some of the, frameworks and processes you use to determine the opportunities that you want to pursue versus the ones that will pass up on or ignore?
Right. I think one, there's probably two things. One is the constant question or thing that we're tussling with, which is new markets, right? It's always a
Hmm.
shiny object. Like, oh, you could get into new
Hmm.
markets, but the reality is a market requires additional resources. You have limited resources. So it's not really a big exercise for us because our resources dictate we just need to focus, right?
Mm,
So
mm,
we're very disciplined about new market, new shiny object. No, we're not interested because we need to do this.
hmm.
So that's, I think the decision is almost made for us just with, being able to prioritize and focus. And then the other
Mm,
part is inventory.
hmm.
And this is the trickiest thing because ideally you would have unending inventory just waiting. But again,
Yeah,
limited resources, you can't do that. So when
yeah.
is the right time to pull the trigger?
Hmm.
You pull it too late, you're out of stock. If you pull it too
Hmm.
early, you can't do certain marketing exercises. So it's
Yeah,
constantly that, you have to really be looking at when things make sense. So that's like a finance and really looking at your books function.
yeah, yeah. Tell me a little bit more about that last piece, the inventory management and sales projecting. I presume that there are times when you are receiving purchase orders from customers and you might have, weeks to deliver that stuff. But that weeks in which a customer expects you to deliver a product is significantly shorter than the amount of time it takes to actually manufacture the product. So, how are you going about making these decisions to figure out how much stock to have on hand and, inventory forecasting?
Right. I mean, it's never perfect, right? It's never
Hmm.
perfect simply because again, I can't stress enough the challenges with being under resourced. If we were
Mm,
have trigger points where we always have something waiting, right?
hmm.
But you have to be very deliberate. And the reality is, it's we haven't perfected it. We're constantly just looking, and I would say, even Monte has been instrumental with this. Just coming up with a framework. Like, okay, at what point do we
Mm,
need to? Let's look at the POs that we have. Let's look at we know the lead times. Um, and the challenges you face is you have the lead times and then you have your circumstances, right? Like over the
mm,
summer, tariffs hit. So it was a
hmm,
lot
hmm,
shipping from Europe. So it's managing all of these things. But I would say it's just having a really good process around it.
hmm, hmm,
The process has different inputs, right? The
hmm,
trigger points, the amount of inventory that you have, forecasting what's coming in the pipeline, capital that
mm,
you have, then that you kind of
yeah.
synthesize all of that to determine how much of an order you should put in, so on and so forth.
Mm. Gotcha, gotcha. Interesting, interesting. So, Monte, you handle more of the operation side of the business, from what I understand, but in a capital intensive and resource constrained, business slash industry like the one you're in, I have to imagine that there's a lot of times where there's a conflict or tension between, the needs or wants of finance and the needs and wants of the, operations department. I'm wondering, have there been any times when a financial constraint forced you to make an operations type decision that was either really difficult or something that a decision that you didn't want to make?
Yeah, I would say just to caveat the question a bit. So the one thing that Kevin and I found out very early on is we had to be nimble, right? So where
Mm-hmm.
obviously Kevin brings a lot of finance background into the game, and myself both operations and marketing. We kind of
Mm-hmm.
get in where we fit in, which makes it a lot less
Mm-hmm.
complicated than it would be in another space, right? So we're kind
Mm-hmm.
of we're kind of hands on in both spaces. I would say
Mm-hmm.
Kevin. I hate to repeat what he said earlier, but I would say the first thing that comes to mind, because it's a question that or a situation that we are always dealing with, is literally going back to that whole conversation about expansion. You know,
Mm-hmm.
like, so if you think about it from an operations standpoint, the brand is solid. The brand can handle it. We have
Mm-hmm.
award-winning liquid. We have, demand. We have the distribution network. But the reality is,
Mm-hmm.
when you're looking at that infrastructure and you have people chomping at the bit, whether those are investors or consumers, hey, when are you going to come to this market? When do you come to that market? And then you look
Mm-hmm.
at competition and you look at what's going on in other spaces, and you're like, okay, they're in places or accounts that we're not right now. You get that itch to
Mm-hmm.
jump in, but you have to be
Mm-hmm.
pragmatic, you know what I mean? And so there are times where we're having conversations about, you know what, maybe we should go into this market or looking to go into that market next quarter, or the case may be. And a lot of those conversations always go back to, the easiest way to fail fast or to fail at all is to do things when you can do them, but you shouldn't do them at the moment, right? So we're always
I
looking
love that. Yeah.
operationally at what's going on, and I'd say I would almost call it controlled depth, versus
Mm-hmm.
premature scale. So that's something that
Okay.
we're always looking at, and then I would say one other thing is just we made the decision very early on to make sure that we are focused on the right thing. So when you're first starting up, especially as a smaller brand, sometimes you
Mm-hmm.
don't think about little things like compliance or getting quote unquote bid with the right partners, but you pay those
Mm-hmm.
dues early so that you can have the right runway in moving forward. So even though it would have been easier
Mm-hmm.
for us not to, we started to connect with the right partners like the ASCs and the Park Streets of the world to handle our back end compliance. And, you're spending a little
Mm-hmm.
more on insurance and some other things to make sure that you're set up for success. Maybe things that you don't need at the moment, but it puts us in a position so
Mm-hmm.
that we can actually compete in the future.
Got it. Got it. Yeah. Interesting. Well, you guys have spoken a lot about, the realities of existing in a capital constrained and resource constrained world. And we're obviously in a very, very resource intensive, expensive industry to be in. Like scaling a business like this takes a lot of capital. Um, Remind me how you guys have funded this so far, and what does the funding journey look like over the next couple of years?
Yeah, so we've, self-funded to a certain
Okay.
extent, and then we did our pre-seed round.
Okay.
We did a successful pre-seed round, and now we're kicking off a seed round. So that's sort
Mm-hmm.
of been the funding journey. The reality is we cannot bootstrap this to success just because of the unit economics and how the
Yeah.
industry works.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's yeah, raising outside capital is definitely a necessity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And how have you thought about, the timing and the magnitude of the amount that you're raising?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is one where, this is a combined effort. So we've been doing a lot of research on best practices
Mm-hmm.
because, there's rules of thumb, right? And there's, again, best practices. So you can raise too much where
Mm-hmm.
it's not beneficial from, the amount of equity that you give up. You can raise too little where you don't have enough time to focus on building the business and you're right back to fundraising, which is a very time consuming exercise. So I think
Yeah.
the sweet spot, at least where we are right now, seed, is
Mm-hmm.
to ensure that you're capitalized to at least put your head down and build for about 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
then you have to run your projections and determine what that looks like, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are the benchmarks and the milestones you're looking to hit, and what are the capital requirements in order to get there? So
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's been very researched, and then obviously, we're pretty well networked within the industry.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
talking to other folks in the startup ecosystem, M&A
Right.
folks, just saying, hey, pressure testing our thoughts. I think
Hmm.
that's been very helpful in understanding the size that we need to raise.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell me, what are the biggest surprises for you guys about fundraising in 2025/26? Like what are the things that you've discovered about this process that you weren't expecting?
Takes a lot of time.
Oh yeah.
That's it. Fundraising is a different muscle. I mean, you ask me
Mm,
about alcohol, the alcohol business. I can speak to it ad nauseum. I know it like the back of my hand. It's
hmm.
surprising how involved even having the right product and a great product. It's a different beast. You know what I mean? It's all about
Mm,
relationships,
mm,
connecting with people, and sometimes you find that you're not even really pitching a brand. You're just building a relationship with someone because people invest in people more than they invest in products. You know,
mm,
and
mm.
you can't just build relationships like that. So it is extremely time consuming, and I think that was one of the biggest shocks to me.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah,
interesting.
I'll echo that. And it's a numbers game. I
Yeah.
remember, early on, you'd hear the stories about people saying, "Oh, I pitched 100 people," and then the person will say, "Okay, where's the next 10x of that? Where's the next 1,000
Yeah.
people?" And you're like, "Wait, what? You're talking 1,000?" But it is like Monte said, it's time consuming and it's a numbers game. So you should aim to have before you complain, have 500 conversations, have that, like aim for more and more and more, but also
Mm,
take the feedback of what people are telling you to know, hey, is this something that has legs? Well, what are people saying? Why are they rejecting? So on and so forth.
hmm. Are there any particular like strategies or tactics that you've found particularly useful when it comes to engaging investors and getting them to move in the direction that you want them to?
Yeah, I
Um,
don't know if this is an actual tactic per se, but again, the one thing we talk about when we talk about our brand is forget who we are for a second, taste the product. The product speaks
Right.
for itself. Now, every product and
Hmm.
brand and service, they say that. But I think when we get our product in people's hand, it really is a different conversation because you got to think about the world we live in is a lifestyle world, even though you're drinking a product, right? We don't create a brand,
Mm,
we create
mm,
a moment, right? So
hmm. Hmm.
again, I don't know if it's a tactic, but really getting people to invite them into our world, give them the product, letting them test the product, taste the product, and
Hmm.
then having the conversations after that has been very fruitful for us.
Hmm.
Again, connecting, building relationships. So one of the things that we do. Well, if they're in the right spaces, invite them into our brand world. So for instance,
Mm,
where we have the luxury of because I'm not pitching a widget. I'm pitching a beautiful vodka.
hmm.
So if I'm having a meeting
Yeah.
with you and you happen to be in my area, I may invite you to a local restaurant that carries my brand that curates a great cocktail, and you bring them into the
Hmm.
into the brand world as you're talking to them, and that's seems to connect people in a lot more strategic way than doing something else.
That sounds like a great way to do an investor meeting. Invite them to a bar and feed them cocktails with your product.
right,
What better way to get a term sheet?
right.
Exactly.
Nice.
One other thing I would say we found somewhat effective is the network effects, right? Where
Uh-huh.
reaching out to individual investors is great, but
Yeah.
you have people who are connectors that believe in the brand. So what we
Yeah.
piloted is having those people host kind of investor conversations. So they'll say something to the effect of, "I'm a big believer in the brand. Come and I will host something around, introducing my network to something that I believe in." So we
Hmm.
automatically have that, vote of confidence, right? And it's a warm intro. So it really, really helps in getting people across the line. So we've done that, a few times. And a good tool that we've utilized is we create a survey because again, trying to be efficient in the process, we've created a survey that these sort of influencer investors, if you will, can share to their network to gauge interest. And then the people
Hmm.
that have a positive response, we set up a Zoom call or a local thing around that. So that's been one tactic that we have used. That's worked.
Wait a sec. This sounds really interesting. So you've given the investors that you're speaking with a tool that they can then share with their network,
Right.
the goal of which is to essentially help you get referrals and I guess other warm intros. Is that correct?
Right. So it literally
Huh.
has questions. So it'll say, so and so invests. I'm a big believer in this brand, and then
Yeah.
answer a few questions like, are you interested in the spirit space? If the right opportunity was presented to you, would it be, what are your typical investment checks? So you kind of lay out, and you can
Mm.
tailor the questions as you see fit,
Hmm.
because you also don't want to waste your time.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you got to
Yeah.
be efficient in the process.
It's almost like a pre-CRM, if you will, right? Because obviously,
Yeah.
when you're looking for things like this, there's SEC regulations, so you got to be careful that stay above board. So these are more
Yeah.
vetting to see if it would lead to something that we can actually connect with.
Interesting. Cool. That sounds like a really clever approach. Well, guys, we've spoken a lot about resource constraints and the sometimes difficult decisions that it forces upon us. We've chatted about focus and picking your battles, and you're obviously in the midst of raising a seed round at the moment, and that represents, a chunk of new resources coming into the business. And so you're going to be able to do things and be afford to, hire people and open up opportunities that you can't currently pay for. I'm wondering if you could tell me a little bit about some of the most exciting opportunities on the horizon for, the next year or two. Like, what are some of the things you're looking forward to being able to do on the other side of this seed round?
Yeah, I mean, so I would say it's again just realizing the vision, right? We have a very strong foundation. I think the last few years where we've sort of done this pilot, we've been masterful in establishing the brand as, objectively one of the best vodkas in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this capital enables us to unlock the value, right? The value in introducing it and going deeper in the markets that we're in. And by
Mm-hmm.
so doing, having the hitting the revenue milestones, which also unlocks value from you know, at the end of the day, if you're raising capital, you're also very focused on your return, right?
Mm-hmm.
So being able to hit these milestones. So now when we get to a Series A, our
Mm-hmm.
valuation has, 5x or so, and everyone's happy, and we don't have any hurdles in kind of hitting that next step. So I would say it's really just fulfillment of the plan that I'm most excited about in the next year or two
Mm.
after we raise our funds.
And,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
if I could add to that,
Mm.
again, I think sometimes we get too serious and overcomplicate things. We are in a fun category. We're in the alcohol business.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm not making paper towels and widgets. I'm making alcohol. So we want to have fun with
Yeah.
it, like what really interested me in this space, which is why I've been in it for so long, is that, it's fun to be able to see people after a long day going out and enjoying time with their friends and family having a cocktail.
Mm.
It's something
Mm-hmm.
special about being able to create those moments. So we want to
Mm-hmm.
be able to
Mm-hmm.
scale those moments and be within those occasions where people are celebrating.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. I love that. I love that. So, guys, it strikes me that you've found a really good balance here between, making decisions based on instinct and gut feel. It sounds like you both have a pretty good sense of that. And you're also, incredibly level-headed when it comes to making your more financial or data-oriented decisions. Um, what what do you see as some of the most complicated decisions that you've had to make thus far? And are there any, particular areas where, additional data or information or insights could have been obviously helpful to you?
I think the question is almost the answer in itself, right? So for us
Mm,
having, I don't know if people really understand how valuable having extensive data is to the success
Mm-hmm.
of companies and brands, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in my day, working with one of the largest spirits companies in the world, we spent millions of dollars on data, right? Whether it's Nielsen
Mm-hmm.
data, NABCA data, millions of dollars.
Right,
But
right.
having that data gave you,
Yeah.
it enabled you to not just have your gut and instinct. It was able to complement and balance those decisions off of that data, right? When
Mm-hmm.
you're a smaller brand, you have to be a lot more nimble because it's, do I want to spend $500,000 on data, or do I need to spend $500,000 on getting inventory, or whatever the case may be, right?
Mm,
So
mm, mm,
your decision making is a lot more gut and instinct, but
mm-hmm.
sometimes when you're trusting, it's the sticking your finger in the air and seeing where the wind is blowing.
Mm,
And I don't want to make it
mm-hmm.
sound that literal, but a lot of times you're dealing with antiquated systems, legacy systems, Excel spreadsheets, and things of that nature. And
Mm,
being able to have access to more data would be extremely helpful and beneficial as we're looking at broader forecasting. Now, again, by definition, the forecast is never accurate, but it's a
yeah.
lot more helpful to get an idea of what's going on in the market. What are competitors doing? What are the indices that you can go after from a benchmarking
Mm,
standpoint? You don't sometimes have access to that data, so you're stuck
mm,
on a lot of legacy systems and dealing with, just hoping that the tracking that you've been doing can lead you and point you in the right direction. And I would say in 2026 and beyond, being able to, especially when you go back to the funding conversation, allocate a little bit more of that investment into forecasting, and specifically when it comes to seeing what's happening in the market would be extremely helpful for us.
yeah. Okay. Interesting. Interesting. So we've spoken a lot about financial resources and the constraints that that represents. But let's change gears a little bit. I'd love to talk or understand a little bit more about team. I understand it's a pretty small team today. As you look ahead to like a post seed round world, how do you anticipate the organizational chart is going to change? What are some of the key hires that you're looking to make here?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing I would say is, obviously getting a head of sales, right?
Uh-huh.
Someone, and even that, just getting someone who can manage our sales function effectively. I
Mm.
think that is probably the most important hire that we can make. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then, I think it boils down to making decisions that just take things off our plates, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
operations, someone who can almost look a little bit closer on the operations function. Someone who can maybe do a little bit more on the marketing execution side of things. So the thought leadership, again, Monte has a marketing background, so we could still do
Mm.
that. But the
Mm-hmm.
day-to-day execution of it, we would want to focus our energies on the most important things that move the needle, and
Mm-hmm.
then kind
Mm-hmm.
of shore up with the org structure. So we very much thought about what the hires look like. So it'd be more boots on the ground, someone who can
Mm-hmm.
hopefully manage the sales function, and then
Yeah.
we'll kick off from there. But we'll still be very nimble, at least in the next couple of years.
Got it. Got it. And how far through this seed round are you at the moment? I mean, do you have clarity at this point on exactly what the amount is going to be, or is there still, some uncertainty about the total amount raised?
So we know how much we are raising. Obviously, it's a two
Mm.
million seed round. We just kicked it off, so we
Mm-hmm.
we have some funds in minimal, and we also have some commitments.
Okay.
So but
Nice.
the reality is, as unless the wire hits, it hasn't
Yeah.
been raised. So the commitments are
Yeah.
great, but it's important that we just go full steam ahead until we cross the finish line.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And are you utilizing any debt to finance this or focus primarily on equity?
We've been focused primarily on equity, but we are
Mm.
considering debt now. We are. So
Okay.
we're starting to look at, yeah, so we're starting to look at some debt options. I
Mm.
think even in a fully funded with equity world, we would
Mm.
100% leverage some line of credits as well. So we'd be thinking about that.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Cool. Guys, this has been super interesting. I'm really, really intrigued by the way that you guys are going about this. And I think you've got some amazing kind of chemistry and magic between the two of you. It's rare that I come across a pair of co-founders who, are just so synergistic and, complement each other so well. And sounds like you've got an amazing product you're working on here. I haven't had the pleasure of tasting it yet, but I might have to. Can I order it through the website, by the way? Is there an e? I can. Okay, so we can place and fulfill e-commerce orders. Cool. All right, I'll check it out. Well, guys, before I let you go, where should people go if they would like to learn more about you or the business? Any particular, social sites or websites you want them to check out?
Yeah, so we're at a lot of places. You can find us online at the brand's website, blackleafvodka.co, not .com. You
Okay.
can also find us on Instagram, Facebook. It's Black Leaf Vodka. You
Hmm.
can also check us out on LinkedIn. Go to Black Leaf's page. Kevin has his LinkedIn page as well, and so do I. So that's just under our names. But yeah, you can find out a little bit more about the brand, a little bit more about us, and we'd be happy to bring you into our community.
And as Monte always says, small brands don't become big brands without your support. So we thank you
I
in
love
advance
that.
for your support.
That's a
Of course,
fact.
of course. Of course, guys. Well, it's been so good having you on. I've really enjoyed chatting with you. Thanks for making the time, and best of luck for 2026 and closing this seed round. I'm looking forward to seeing you go on and do great and wonderful things in the year or two ahead. Thanks again.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Nate.